welcome, Oscar, to the Nifty Travel Podcast. Really nice to meet
Hello.
you.
Hello. Yeah, nice to meet you as well. Thank you for having me here.
No, you're welcome. And the way I always like to start off every podcast is to ask you about your earliest memories of travel.
Oh, Aries. It's not really going to be travel abroad, but I remember when I was a little kid, I used to travel with my parents around the country, and I just like very vividly remember sitting in the back seat and going through those like um, seemingly unimportant places, unimportant cities, just like completely random locations with them, listening to like a rock music in the background. And always like it was very, I would say that that's my earliest memory of traveling in general. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, but if you're asking about my earliest memory of traveling just by myself, uh, traveling just by myself, I think I'll still be traveling inside of a country to different cities by via train. That's like just being alone in a train. I'm like 16 years old or something like this, traveling through the country to some other cities. Yeah, that'll be like the earliest memory.
So, would you say that very early on you knew that travel would be important to you in some way?
Um, Not necessarily that I knew about that. I actually would say that when I was high school and even university, I didn't really travel that much. I used to travel somewhere here and there, mostly around like Europe and also within the country. But I don't really think about this that much. However, I think that the most important thing that shaped my perspective of traveling was actually when I was a kid, and it's not because I traveled somewhere, but because both my grandpa and my dad used to travel a lot abroad. My grandpa was a sailor, so he was traveling for 9 out of 12 months a year, right? And he was traveling literally everywhere. And my dad used to travel a lot about Europe. He works in a theater, so he was traveling with plays all over, certain places in Europe. And both of those people were an amazing storytellers. Like the when they came back, they used to tell stories about those places and show you images and bring you stuff from those places, showing this is how it is here. From my dad, especially like Central Europe, so a place like Switzerland or like Germany, for example. Like there's like a lot of particular places, and it's more like intimate relationship they had with those places because they spent quite a lot of time there. And then similar with my grandpa, but he was telling me more stories about, like, let's say Far East, right? So this is how Singapore is, this is how Hong Kong is, and stuff like this. And I used to spend a lot of time with them talking about that. And that, when I was a kid, really shaped my image of the world, and also make it. I know that traveling for a lot of people seems like it's unattainable, like it's just something far away. It's not something that it's part of their life. But me, like, it felt very natural ever since I was a kid. Like, this is part of normal person life, right? Like, a little bit adventurous, a little bit exploring, seeing this and that. But as I said, when I was in high school and university, I didn't really travel that much. But later, when I started working, I started traveling a little bit more, exploring more of like Europe, most of all. But there was a moment when everything like kicks in and like changed my life, and that was the moment where I was like, I want to travel, I want to do that. And that thing was my first trip to Japan. Yeah, I was. It was in the first company after I finished university. I used to work for them, and they told me that I need to go for a vacation somewhere, basically, right? And I was like, oh yeah, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of places I want to see, but it's not like I need to. Oh, I need to go. Let's say to Venice. I need to go there. I've been to a lot of places, so it's like, yeah, I want to explore, but I'm not really that super excited at the moment about that. And then I started thinking to myself, the real places that I want to see is like, I don't know, like South America or something like this, or Japan. And I was like sitting for like literally like 10 seconds, and it was like, yeah, why not? Let's just pack and let's go, right? So I just booked a flight without any plan, flew to Tokyo, right? And that was the most amazing experience ever. Like I it's not because I've seen the most amazing thing or had the most amazing meal or meet the most amazing people. No, it was just like I've landed there. I didn't speak the language or anything, and I was just like, I I went into the city and just get lost, and it was so much fun. And ever since that, I knew that I want to do more and more of that. And after that, I started traveling more and more, and did get to the point right now where I travel most of the year. And yeah, right now it's very different. And in Japan, of course, became like significant part of my identity as a traveler, and then basically my second home as well.
Well, that nicely leads on to then, um, what was it about Japan that really affected you, or made you think, "Wow, this is such an amazing place. I need to know more about it."
So of course, as I said, when I was younger, I've been raised by all of the stories of the places, right? So I had the image of the place, and I think it was very different from most people's imagining of Japan, for example, and in that region. But like Europe, I can go to different places in Europe, and of course they have their different cultures and different tradition, and architecture is different, blah, blah, and all of those things, right? And it's fun. I absolutely love traveling through Europe. It's still my favorite, continent to explore. But Japan was just very different, and I was fascinated by all of those differences. And I, especially at the very beginning, I would say people always say, "Oh yeah, they have like fast trains, or they have like this anime culture or something like this." I didn't really care that much about the big things. I was fascinated with all the small details. The fact that the way they greet each other, right? Or the way people conduct themselves, the way they dress when they go to work, and all of those like small things. Like I was fascinating with places where people stood outside of the shop, and of course I cannot read Japanese at that moment at all. Right now it's a little bit better, but still, right? And I didn't even know what they were like, what they were lining for, because it didn't look like a restaurant. I look inside and I don't even understand the things that are inside. So it's just like every single small thing, every encounter was just fascinating. It was just, and also spending time in Tokyo, which was my first trip. Even today, after spending years in Tokyo, I can say that there is always something to discover. Like there is always something new that you've never seen, and it is going to surprise you in a megalopolis like that. So, yeah, I was just fascinated with every single thing. I didn't really, because I know that a lot of people have this, like they idealize certain places. I never really had that. I was more like, I try to understand how the place is for real, and this is also talking with people. And after that, yeah, I started learning language and started meeting people, learning new things, and that's how it went. Yeah, but the fascination, I think, was the biggest thing with the small things.
Yes, it sounds like you enjoyed the unexpected.
Oh
Side of
yeah, definitely, definitely, yeah. Generally, the way I travel very often is very improvised. I know that a lot of people don't like that, but I like getting lost. Like I like arriving in a new place, a new city, for example, and knowing nothing about it, and just getting lost, talking with people. I'm gonna learn from them what's worth seeing here and there, which is very often very rewarding experience, because they're gonna take you or show you places which you would never even think about. You will not find them in any guide or anything like this, right? It has a downside as well, because there's been situations where I visit some places and came back from there talking with my friends, and they're like, "Oh, you've been there, so you must have seen this and this thing." I'm like, actually, I didn't. And we're like, this is the most famous thing in this place. How could you not see this? I was like, I didn't read the guide. That's why. You know, it's really fun. It's really rewarding. Yeah.
Yeah, in some respects, I have to fight to be spontaneous because I have a natural inclination to organize everything in
Okay.
advance. You know, I'm very structured, but actually, it's the unstructured things that you remember the most. That,
Mm.
that's my own personal experience. So, would you say that Japan then is fascinating because it's perhaps an old school society or old style culture that perhaps we no longer adhere um, to back in Europe? Do you think there's a sort of a
Mm.
something about them that they're very stoic?
Yes and no. I would say that there is an appeal in the fact that they are not that open and they don't share that easily the things about their life and everything. It seems that when you are, and there's also a lot of people also say that Japanese always look at foreigners, gaijin, right? That they are, even if they live for a very long time in Japan, they are still gaijin. They're not part of Japanese society. There is always going to be perceived as the outsider, and because of that, there are certain things that they don't share with you. So there is an aspect of mystery to their culture, which is like always there, right? So there is you kind of think you know it, you kind of think you figure it out, but there is still something that it seems mysterious, like something that you don't really quite are able to put your finger on, right? It's like this is exactly this is like I kind of think it's this, you know, and their answer is always going to be like, yeah, it is, but kind of no, and it's like you cannot really. It takes years to gain their trust and actually get the real answer, and this is really fascinating because after many years they can actually tell you that no, this actually we know each other for like 10 years and we've been always telling you that you know the thing you're doing or this is because of that, but actually it's because of something completely different. And you know after 10 years you're just like wow, you could just tell me, like here in Europe we were much more like direct, right? So we're just going to be like this is it, right? But it takes them time to actually introduce you to this culture, but then they are also treating you differently. Yeah, so I think that this is the appeal. Are they like very old school? It really depends. In some areas they are, and of course this also can have an appeal to travelers, and definitely does, right? But in others, I would say they are much more progressive than most people would imagine, right? So it's um, yeah, the perspective is very different on that. Yeah, that's true. It of course vary from person to person. There is this traditional aspect of the culture which they really protect, and this is of course culturally what people might be interested in. But yeah, and so yeah, that definitely is an appeal. I would say it's not everything, but it's part of the
Yeah,
appeal.
and of course it's you know, people think of Japan, oh well, it's Tokyo and it's the major and the other major cities, but we often forget that um, Japan is made up of many different islands of different
Mm.
sizes and shapes. So I suppose um, uh, if you've travelled to some of those, you've noticed some very particular differences between them, and perhaps
Mm.
even uh, the people that live there too. Is that
Oh,
true?
yeah, that's definitely true. Yeah, even like people in Tokyo, you will go outside of Tokyo, let's say 2 hours by train out of Tokyo, and you will see a world which is very different. People in Tokyo, or people in Osaka have a particular mindset. Like, of course, people in Osaka are a little bit more open and more energetic. People in Tokyo are very quiet and very like strict. I think the most of the entire Japan. People in the countryside are much more open. Yeah, they're much more open. They're much more excited also to see foreigners. I feel like a lot of people in, for example, Tokyo are tired of foreigners. I would say in people in Europe, in some like tourist hubs, can say the same thing, right? They are a little bit tired of tourists, which is a funny thing to say because it's part of you should be proud of that. But yeah, I can see why is that. But people in the countryside are much more excited to see tourists, and they can show you a little bit more real Japan. And I think it's true not only for Japan but other places in the world as well. Like if you go outside of the main tourist destinations, you can actually get rewarded with much more authentic experience.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. If you follow the crowds, you only see one story, one side of a culture, don't you? So, talking about the wider traveling experience, then you say you've visited more than 20 countries. Um, so
Oh,
probably.
50 actually.
Oh wow, you keep adding to your story. So what would what's more important? Say the journeys themselves or the destinations?
Definitely the journey. The older I get, the more I'm focused about the experience, like the journey. Like the destination, of course, it's really cool to finally get to the place and finally see a place like that. But living as a digital nomad and traveling all the time, I really stopped really caring about getting to a particular place. Of course, there are places I want to visit. I have a huge list of places that I want to visit, but I just enjoy the experience of traveling in itself, right? And then being a digital nomad, being in a waking up in a different place, the next day, and being able to experience something new, and see new places and everything like that. So yeah, I definitely experience like enjoy the journey more than the destinations. As I said, at this point, I don't even have any goals when it comes to traveling itself. I just want to keep traveling.
Mm. So there must be something. Can you pick some examples of journeys that you've gone on that I don't know particularly surprised you? Because we all have a preconception of what may happen on a journey. But have you been surprised on a few occasions?
Oh, I've been surprised a lot of times, in a both positive and negative way, I would say. So, but let's focus on more positive things, right? As I said, I like traveling without plan and without researching a lot about places. So very often I have a like preconception of a place that comes from the general knowledge, I don't know, from movies or something like this, right? But when you arrive in a place, it's very different. I would say from this year, places like that is definitely Hong Kong and Macau, which I visited for the first time. But from a very very similar group of places, I would say Taiwan. Last year I was visiting Taipei, and then some of the surrounding area, and I thought that it's going to look like Korea, which was also another surprise, but in a negative way, where it's going to be very generic. It's going to be you look at the images of, let's say, Shanghai or something. It's like, okay, that's the place, right? It's like very generic like this, but it's very different. It's much more gritty. It's much more I would say unrefined, right? So there is much more of those authentic experiences. There is because some places which are like tourist destinations are very like artificial. I hate that. I really don't like that. And in Taipei, there was much more genuine experience. Like every restaurant seems like authentic. Maybe not every, but like the places I've been seems more authentic. People seem more honest with how they view the world, so we have more like insightful discussions with them, right? So that was definitely, and it's also a beautiful place. Like like the outsides, I thought it's just going to be an island, and I don't know why I imagine it's going to be flat, but it's actually very mountainy. And I also venture a little bit more into those mountains to a place like Jiufan, and which was an inspiration for like some anime stuff. And it looks beautiful. It looks scenic. The views from there are absolutely amazing. And it was raining all the time, which actually was great because it adds to the atmosphere of like this adventure mystery thing. Yeah, that was really cool. And on like surprises, I already mentioned Korea. Yeah, Korea was one of the places that I visited after my, I think, third visit to Japan. And I was flying from Osaka, I think. And my image that I had in my mind of Korea was that, oh, it's very like advanced country. It's very like skyscrapers, the K-pop thing, all of the. It was like very trendy country at this time. So it was like, oh yeah, that's how it's gonna look. I was very, I don't want to use the word disappointed, but very surprised with what I saw. And I knew that Korean people have a tendency, for example, to like, for example, they like dress similar. So when there's like a trend in Korea, people love following that trend, right? I think this is a thing out there. But I look at the people. I was like, okay, I actually kind of expected that. That's okay. But then I look at the highway, and every single car out there, like 90%, it was like white Hyundai sedan. It was like the same car, 90% of the city. And I was like, this feels like a glitch in the matrix. Like something is like, and the city feels like that. It's very like Seoul, for example. It feels very Americanized. I didn't really enjoy that experience out there. I did enjoy much more the like the countryside of Korea, and also other cities like what was the other side? Busan, yeah, Busan, the other place, and some other it's like small islands around that, but much better experience. But still, a little bit strange. It just feels strange. I also remember walking. I was in the island of Incheon, like near the airport, and I was walking. I had 2 days to just like waiting for a plane out there, and I was walking around the island, and a thing that I could not really understand was like there's a lot of those like apartment complexes, and every single one of them have like 30 skyscrapers, like 20 stores high or something like this. And there was in the entire island there was like I don't know 6, 7 neighborhoods like that, and there was like not a single person out there.
Really?
But what was strange is that initially I was like, oh, so maybe they just built them like recently. But next to them you have a park which was already completely overgrown and is like clearly built 10 years ago, and those buildings as well. I was like, there is no one here. This like the whole experience out there was very surreal. Like, it feels a little bit artificial. So that was something that I did not expect. My image before that of Korea was very different. And interestingly, I talk with a lot of people that travel to Korea, and they actually have a very similar opinion on what they saw. Yeah.
That's very surprising, isn't it? Because doesn't South Korea have one of the shortest and most populous airline routes? I
Yeah,
think.
they
Uh,
have they have a huge airport out there, and it's clearly there is a lot of movement of people out there, and there is a lot of things going on. For example, there clearly is a lot of business, but I don't know, maybe people are just too busy to do anything. It feels very artificial. This whole experience. I don't know why. Like compared to Japan, because I came there from Japan, and Japan is people are also overworked, but Japan is culturally so like rich, and you just like, go to places it's like, oh, you have different foods, you have different clothing, this that, temple here, this there, and it's like they also have this like Showa period, the golden periods, like which was quite recently, and Edo period, and there's a little bit of this from that period, and this and this. It's just like there's so many interesting things in every single period, and Korea have none of that, and I was very disappointed. I want to revisit this place and try to maybe a different kind of travel there to understand if maybe I should look at different things. But yeah, so far that was not the most I don't want to say it was a bad experience, but it was strange, like unexpected, very unexpected.
Yeah. Well, I think travel should have the power to take us by surprise, because obviously we're basing our experiences on our own, to a certain extent, on our own experiences and our own culture, aren't we? So you step into somebody else's world, um, and you can't expect it to be exactly how you expect every time, I suppose. I mean, I've
Yeah,
even found that going into a big city in Australia, um, you know, in one street away from one other place can be completely different. Um,
Hmm.
and
Oh yeah, that's definitely true. I think this is why it's very also important to be very respectful to whatever you're seeing, and right, and be try to understand, because the fact that people live different than you imagine, or even different than you think they should, or something like this, it's not for you to really judge any of this. So just appreciate that and try to get something out of it, right? So for me, also in case of Korea, it's not like I'm saying that those people, they're wrong, like this should not be like this, right? It's more like, yeah, that surprised me, and this is something very unexpected. But I guess this is how people out there want to live, right? So clearly it works for them, right?
yeah, exactly. You mentioned that when you were in Taiwan, you linked eating out as being part of the experience. So um, so food then, I guess, is very high up um, in your list of needs.
I wouldn't necessarily say so. I would say that it is a thing. Actually, I'm a nightmare when it comes to eating and food, in a sense that I'm very picky and everything. But uh, and I'm not very a foodie person. That's for sure. But it's for a lot of cultures, it's a big thing of their identity and what they are, and not only in sense that this is what that the food in itself is that important, but the socializing aspect of it can be a huge part of the culture, right? So because of that, there's a great value in that, right? So you have places, for example, where the whole event happens around, like the whole socializing always happens around food, and also different kinds of food can mean different things, right? So it's like for example in India or in Japan as well, you have those events where people socialize after work a lot, which is very infamous, I would say, rather, right? When people meet and drink and talk, and this is how they socialize in a more relaxed manner, right? But it works like that in other countries as well, and then you can also learn a lot about their culture and history by what they eat, right? So not only in the religious sense that oh, they don't eat this because it's not allowed in their religion or something like this, but for example, if they eat that particular thing, you might be like, oh, okay, so they eat a lot of fish, right? Let's say, oh, so they are very like sea country, right? They're like more connected with the sea than with anything else, and you will go to other place and you'll have, like in Poland, for example, you have a lot much more meat and like things like venison and stuff. So like, oh, so they must have a lot of forest and must have a lot of wildlife out there, right? So we can also derive some insights from things like this.
Mm, yeah, I think uh, I think it's true what they say. We are what we eat, um, to a certain extent. Um, You mentioned Hong Kong, and obviously it's getting more Chinese by the day.
Mm.
Um, when I was in Singapore once, I accidentally came across what I described as an authentic uh, Chinese market, which was also where lots of Chinese people like to eat. I didn't find a similar place in
Mm.
Hong Kong, but it was
Oh,
fascinating
there
to
is.
uh, because it was similar to the way you've been describing it, in that it's part of the social fabric of
Mm.
Chinese communities. and
Definitely.
part of it was choosing what food you wanted, and then you gave it to someone who cooked it for you.
Hmm.
Uh, and I just thought that was fascinating, and it just felt like a much more genuine experience. I didn't understand a word they were saying, but it didn't seem to matter.
That's fine. This is why this is another aspect. Like food helps. Like you might not understand words, or you know, have problem communicating, but when you sit, there is already like in eat. There is already some sort of understanding between each other because you're both gonna eat, right? And then you can say, "Oh, this is good. You like this, or you don't like this," right? And you don't even need the words to describe stuff like that, right? And from that, you can start building conversation with people that are completely, unable even to speak the language. And it's also very. It gives you some hook to start the conversation with, because if you approach strangers, you cannot just come to them and say, hey, listen, I have a question about your eating habits or something like that. They'll just look at them like, what are you doing, right? But if you just join people eating, right, then you will naturally get introduced to parts of their culture and parts of their habits, right? Yeah, so it's just naturally works itself out.
Mm, it does. So let's change direction a little here. So one thing you clearly like doing is taking photographs, and I was thinking about this because I may not look old, but I used to do a lot of photography myself, but then got tempted by the idea of going digital. So I kind of
Mm.
think there's a massive difference. When you take a shot with your iPhone, you're taking a photo, but when you take one with film, that's called photography.
Mm.
It's something completely different. So, do tell me how you were uh, attracted towards photography, and it's clearly very something that's very important to you.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Very good question. Um, so my journey with photography starts when I was like 15 or something like that, and it have nothing to do with Polaroid, which is the main thing I do when it comes to photography nowadays. I start with doing shooting with digital camera, and it happens by complete accident. I went with a friend of mine to an extreme sport event, like a very small one, and it was like BMX dirt competition. So people, jumping in a dirt mold, right, and doing some tricks and stuff like that. And a friend of mine was taking photos of them, and then he gave me like this old, like small camera, and I look at the photos like, those are terrible. Like, what are you doing? Like, what is this? I never was a photography person before, but I started making like taking those photos, and later we published them online, and everyone loves them. So I started doing more and more of that. And in my high school, university times, I was doing extreme sport photography. I was doing this, yeah, to earn some money on the side while going to school and stuff like this, right? But I was that was really fun. That was really fun. A lot of like BMX, skateboarding, mostly those things. I was also traveling to an events during that time, doing that kind of photography as well. It was really fun, mostly with like digital cameras. Then I get bored with this because it's my friends that have been doing those sports, they stopped doing that, so I started doing different things. Um, I did some portraits, like mostly women portraits for some time, and I always like very quickly the whole photography become part of the identity, and a lot of people just associate with me with camera, and I also feel very comfortable behind the camera making photos. Like it just I remember when I was younger and we even went to a parties, I took a camera with me, and when people were doing like partying something like that, I was just like documenting stuff because it was more interesting for me that way, right? So it was some sort of a way for me to interact with the world and learn about the world and process that in my way. Then I stopped doing all those things. I still have the camera, and it was also during the same trip to Japan. when the Polaroid fascination happened again. I had an old Polaroid camera before, and I was sometimes making some photos with this. When I first went to Japan, I took all of my DSLR cameras, all of the lenses, everything. Like my luggage was basically just cameras. It was so heavy, and I also took Polaroid camera with me, and just I think one film or maybe two films, because it was very difficult to get films for Polaroid back then. Um, and I went there, and the funny thing is, I spent I think like 10 days in Tokyo. I didn't even took my DSLR camera out of my backpack, but I was carrying the Polaroid camera everywhere, and I made a couple of photos. And to this day, I very often just come back to those photos. And that was a moment where I realized that it's really cool because I can make something that I will just come back to, right? Making a lot of amazing photos with DSLR, it's great, but they're just going to vanish. They're just going to disappear, right? And I want to have something which is tangible, especially that everything nowadays is like it's on phone, it's on a computer and everything. I want to have something that I can touch, I can interact with it. I can hang it on the wall. I can do something else. I can sign it. It's like feel it, smell it, even. The photo, like it's dirty a little bit. So I was like, oh, it's dirty because I was eating something and then it stick to it and I could not clean it out of this photo. I was like, oh, I remember that, and it brings memory out of this. So I started doing photos with Polaroid camera. After that, more and more and more. And then because I was, as I said, when I was a kid, I was influenced a lot by my dad and my grandpa, which was like very good storytellers. I always wanted to tell stories as well. And those photos were a natural addition to the storytelling, right? So I started building my stories around that. At the beginning, I either had too little photos to add them to his stories, or like too much, but I didn't really have a story to tell. Right now, I'm much better at this, and right now, I this is my primary storytelling device, I would say, from all of the places that I visit, and it's pretty unique. I would say it's pretty unique. There isn't really a lot of people that do it like that, and it's just fun. It's much more fun. It's really much more enjoyable than just like using DSLR and then going to Photoshop or something like this. No, it's just I had one chance to make this shot. I did it. It looks, I guess it's good, and that's just have to stay. And it's also part of the story that you're gonna tell. Right?
Yeah. Well, any pictures is about capturing a moment in
Mhm.
time, isn't it? And I think you're right about the differences between um, something you can hold and something that which is digital, which often people lose. You know,
Mhm.
I take way more photographs now than I ever did when I had to film. I was very picky, but if I only had 16 slots on
Yeah.
my, I was very particular about what I would take. Uh,
Yeah, yeah, you need to be a little bit strategical about, okay, so I want to, for example, let's say show Hong Kong. I have only 20 photos for Hong Kong. Some of them can also be just complete trash, and they're just not going to work because Polaroid is also a very picky camera, but any film camera is a little bit more difficult to work with, right? So you need to be very strategical about, okay, I want to show this and this thing, right? Which I know myself, and I often have a tendency to just go in and I'm so excited. Just like I used half of the film immediately, just making some random things, only to later I was like, oh, I could make this. This is so interesting. But you always have an iPhone, or like other kind of camera, so you can. So I'm like doing a little bit of this, a little bit of that, depending on which kind of story I want to tell at the moment. Because
mm,
using iPhone is also like, or like anything that records videos and sound, compared to this, is a very different medium, right? So it can show you a world in a very different way. And I love making those like just still videos, like 10 seconds of just like people going around their business or something like this. It really is like a window to that place, right? Because a lot of videos are like, oh yeah, this those like famous landmarks and something. And of course, I also make photos and videos of landmarks. Who wouldn't want to make videos of that, right? But I like those more intimate moments where you can like be able to capture something very unique and very personal in interaction with the place and the people.
So, whether you're taking a Polaroid still or a 10-second video, do you ever go back to them and see something you didn't see at the time?
Very often, so I've always been, I never really liked taking a lot of photos and videos. So I'm very picky when it comes to like, oh, I like this video. I want to make this particular video, and I don't really have that much material from every single place, and even more with Polaroids, right? I'm very deliberate. But yeah, there's after that, I very often go back to those videos and photos. Like I really do. Do I learn some new things? I would say, of course, there are situations when I look at the photo and I'm going to be like, oh yeah, I never like noticed this here before. But I think the very fascinating thing is that you make a photo of something that you don't really know or understand, and later someone tells you a story and say, oh, there is this place out there, and it's very culturally significant, something like this, and then you're just sitting like, wait a second, that's the thing. Oh, okay. I actually made a photo of that thing, and then you show it. It's like, oh yeah, that's the thing. It was like, so that's what it's all about. Oh, I would like. I never really put any thought into that, but there was like a story behind this. I like one of my really also quite recent things like that is you have those in Andalusia in Spain. A lot of houses that have those azulejos, those tiled images of usually Virgin Mary, but there's also they can depict anything else, right? And I was like, oh, this is really cool. And I was like, oh, this is Christianity, and they're very Catholic also. So like my image of that aligns with what I'm seeing here. But later, I wanted to write something about that, and I did a little bit more research, and I learned like the whole history that it actually comes from the Moorish, influences when they rule over the Iberian Peninsula, and this is it's like, oh, this actually makes sense because they are actually famous in Morocco for their tiles, but because of a completely different culture, the tiles in Morocco are more like shaped, right, because of Islam, right? And here they are like completely different. They depict images, right? So it's like very interesting cultural historical interplay, something that you can learn from. And I have some like I was taking a lot of some Polaroid images of those azulejos in especially in Sevilla, and that was something that I learned in cultural insight because of that. I wanted to tell a story about something that I just thought initially looks nice, but there is a huge history behind this.
And history is important, isn't it? Because it's very closely linked to travel. Um,
Mm.
you know,
Some places more than others.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that's what fascinates me. I like to know why a place is there. Often
Mm.
travelers are just going there. Well, that's where I work, or that's where I live. Oh, I'm picking the kids up from school. Yeah, but you know, why? Why did it happen?
Mm. Yeah, that's
why is there a place here? Uh, so I think
yeah,
you're right.
that's yeah. That's also a very interesting historical thing. Like to this exact point, also connected a little bit to Hong Kong again, but Macau, right? So I remember I went to Macau and I was thinking, oh, I know that's like famous for gambling and that kind of stuff, and it's a Chinese, right, special administrative region, but it used to belong to someone else, but and I knew that Hong Kong, of course, like British influences and everything, you can see that very clearly when you are in Hong Kong. But then I went to Macau and was like, there is this. That was the first I remember. I ended up in a place that looks like a town square, but from like Southern European city or like South American. I was like, what is going on here? And then I see like some signs, which is like this is not Spanish. This is Portuguese, and there was like another like Catholic church and the ruin of another Catholic church. It's like, oh, this used to be a Portuguese colony. Like I never really. So this is why it was established. This is like the stronghold of Portuguese in that region. I was like, oh, I once again, like, you learn so much about the history by just visiting this place, right? You would never really think of it like that. So yeah, discovering stuff like this is super interesting. I have to say, it's really fascinating, especially the surprising things. If you go somewhere, of course, and then there's like some things are more obvious, but the surprising things are always just like enjoyable.
Mm. I think you certainly like noticing things. That's
I think so. I spend a lot of time walking. Just like my favorite like way of exploration of any city is just walk around the city and like no purpose, just walk around the city and then try to look around and try to notice things. And this is how you get the most interesting insights about the place.
yeah, and usually you notice more than the people who live there.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, that's definitely true. I even would say there is an interesting thing here that um, I remember before I really started traveling a lot. In case of Gdańsk, for example, in Poland, I was like, I know everything about this place. Like, I was even thinking to myself, this is so boring. Like, I know everything, what's everywhere. There's nothing to learn about this place. I started and I appreciate this place more and more every single time when I come back from a longer trip. I discover so many like new things. I feel like a tourist a little bit, after when you came back after like a year of absence, you start discovering things as a tourist, like a completely different perspective. And then you start to appreciate that more and more. Yeah.
Yeah, so
And this
you
is the same when you visit place for the like which is not native to you. You see things that locals completely ignore because this is just their daily life. They don't think about that, but for you, it's going to be fascinating.
yeah, that for me is why travel is fascinating.
Mm.
There's always something new to discover. So I notice you have half a picture of a map on your website, but it's not an ordinary map. It's uh, I forget what it was exactly, but I recognise the style of map because, well, it's a piece of London, I think. Um,
Yes,
but
it is.
it's also an old style map because it's how they used to draw maps by hand
Yeah,
and color
yeah,
things in. Is there
yeah.
something
This is
about
why I
that?
have
Yeah.
a similar style map in the background, which is actually a new one. But the one that you mentioned on the website, I remember it's from um, a bookstore in Blackheath, in London, in the suburbs of London. There was this amazing bookstore that sold books, but also old maps. And then this is one of the maps that I bought from there. And maps are really fascinating as well, like especially old things. I also like old books. Like one of the things that I always collect when I go somewhere is books, like local books. Even if I don't speak the language, I want to have something like culturally significant from that place in terms of the books. And maps are sometimes also a thing that I buy.
Yeah. So what do you get from maps that perhaps other travelers don't?
Oh, there is especially to how cities evolve. If you get a map which is, let's say, 100 years old, like hand drawn map or something like this, and then you compare it with the place that you see right now, you will see the differences, everything that changed, but also most importantly the thing that stayed the same, right? So then you can go to those places and reference them historically. So even if there is not a particular story that everyone knows about this place, probably there is some kind of a story behind it because this building has been there for a long time, right? Even if as it might not seem so, but you can derive an insight like that from an old map as well. Yeah, but London is also a very interesting place, but places in Asia as well. I also like a city in Poland which is called Łódź, which was like before World War II, was like a huge hub of like industrial hub in that part of the world. Right now, a lot of the buildings are not in the best condition. They're working really hard to renovate them, but there's like so many stories. And I had a map, an old map of Łódź, which like describes who owned those places, which is not an information that nowadays from the internet you can't really get this information that easily, right? But then if you have this map and then you have your photos, you can start investigating and learning about the inside of those places. And I learned some absolutely fascinating stories about some of the buildings out there that are being still renovated or already renovated, which just fascinated me from the photos. Once again, like you look at the photos and like this place looks interesting. Can I find it here? Who does it belong to? Right? Yeah.
Yes, well, that is true, isn't it? I mean, I went to the city of Belfast in Northern Ireland to go
Mm,
and see where the great Titanic ship was built, and the old
mm,
drawing office is now a hotel, but they've kept all the shapes of the buildings around it,
mm,
and I think it helps to tell the story of the shipbuilding, which shipbuilding can be, it was a very complicated story. That there wasn't suddenly a ship. It had a very
gross.
long story and a long journey. So I think buildings do tell a story if you're willing to look into. It's not what it is now, but what it was before. Um,
Mm.
can have a big influence.
Yeah, it can also tell you a lot of the things how the city changed culturally as well. Like you look at the old map and you say, oh, this is, for example, in a lot of Polish cities before World War II, you have, oh, that was a Jewish quarter, right? And it's like, oh, okay, so now it explains the things that I see here, right? So this was that. Oh, there was like let's say a synagogue here or something like that. It's very useful to better understand the place, especially the old maps. The new maps, I mean, I don't really buy new maps, so I can't really comment on new maps, but the old maps are very, very interesting in that sense. Yeah, there are smaller things as well, like I would say, like a blueprints. You can find a blueprints of some things that can also tell you, okay, so there was a the kind of machinery that was produced here. So clearly, that place produces that kind of machinery. Is there a factory? Is there someone famous that invented something here? And this is like opens a way for exploration, right? Because let's be honest, when you want to travel, want to see places, it's good to have some sort of not necessarily a travel plan, but some sort of I don't know, like agenda, like you're traveling because you want to learn about something, and it's easier when it's more tangible thing, right? So, if let's say you want to learn about the famous engineers of the world, like shipbuilders, let's say, for example, right? So this is a good starting point to start drawing a travel plan, right? And you're going to learn more and more things about the places, and I was like, oh, so there's another place that I want to visit, and then so on. It didn't start slowly building.
Yeah, and pretty soon you end up visiting all the places in the world that
Exactly.
ship.
Exactly. Exactly.
You
Then
can get way
you're
out
a
of
former
control.
expert in that, right?
Mm.
Yeah. That's
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. So, because you've done a lot of traveling, I see that you now refer to yourself as a digital nomad, but there hasn't always been such a thing. So, when do you think you crossed the threshold of being someone who was just a curious traveler and became someone who was doing it more as a lifestyle choice, if that's the
mm.
way of describing it?
Yeah. So I, of course, after university, I initially started working for a companies, shipping companies, to make things interesting because I always need to be somehow connected to like the traveling aspect, and like there was something naturally, the natural inclination towards it. And I worked for a couple of years for two companies here in Poland, and I was like, have a thing that I get bored really quickly. Like it's things I can be in the most interesting place in the world, but I still, as soon as I'll explore what I have to explore, then it just starts to get boring, and I want to go somewhere else. So for me, working for a company like this, where I need to go to the office every day, it was just a torment. And at a certain point, I realized that I cannot do this. Like, I don't want to do this. I need to escape from this, right? So I started thinking, okay, so what do I need to do to make it happen? Let's start to think. What First of all, I would need to have some sort of source of income to pay for like not being here, but also I need to work at the same time. So I need to work remotely in order to do that. So I already been doing some let's say programming, data science ish kind of thing in the previous companies. I've been involved in projects like that. Just like, okay, so if I learn more about that, can I do this remotely? And I started like slowly. It didn't happen like immediately, but slowly started like learning more of this and being like, okay, I will take care of this project, but it's going to be remotely, right? Because you don't really need me to be here in the office, right? And they're like, oh, not really, right? So of course we can meet next week. And I was like, okay, so next week we're going to meet and slowly start building this and building. I get to the point where I have enough knowledge and business expertise and everything where I was like, okay, I'm just going to take care of those projects. We're going to give it to me. I'm going to, lead that remotely. And then I'm just going to take care of this, right? And if the clients see that it's, you're on time with everything works great, and they have trust in you that you can do that, and they don't really care where you are. Of course, some clients might require you to be in a place, but trying to it's good to try to find good business partners and clients that understand that you don't need to be. So currently, I'm working as a data science consultant for supply chain and logistics and those kind of things, and I work 100% remotely. Um, I have to say, not for the my consultancy company. It's not really that important for them, because for them it's always been like, oh, if you want to work from anywhere in the world, that's fine. We don't really care. Right? But it's up to the client to decide. Right? He's the one who's paying for everything. So you need to basically get in an agreement with them. Right? And I have to say that pandemic actually helped here. I think a lot of digital nomads would actually say the same thing, because pandemic showed a lot of the companies that things can be done on time, according to the schedule, and people don't need to be in the office. There's just no need for this. Right? Especially the more experienced people, we know that they can work independent. We have trust in those people, so it's fine. They can do it. They can handle it, right? So it helped people like me quite a lot, because after pandemic, no one even like before pandemic, people were questioning this a little bit. It's like, oh yeah, it'd be good if you will like show up and everything. Right now, no one really thinks about it. If you can do it remotely, that's just how it is. Because there's a lot of people similar to you that they might not travel around the world, but they just don't work from the office, right? Especially in
Yeah.
this way of work.
So, did you find that when you started doing your remote work, did you find that you kind of have to have a survival guide? Uh,
I I definitely very quickly realized that, because people, of course, idealize being a digital nomad. It's like, oh yeah, you sit on a beach and you work and things like that. When there is no one around you and there is no people that you directly interact with when it comes to the business that you do, it requires a lot of discipline. That was one of the first things that I learned, that it really requires a lot of discipline to be able to do that. And that was my biggest challenge, to get disciplined myself to like, okay, this is time for work, right? Otherwise you're gonna start, not meeting deadlines, and so you should focus on this. Other than that, I mean, not really. It requires a lot of logistics and organization, things like make sure that you can work from this place, because you have a lot of clients that might have special requirements. They, for example, will not allow you to work from certain places, security reason mostly. You yourself need to have good connection, like internet, healthcare. You need to have, for example, initially when I was traveling, I was staying more in like hostels and things like that. Right now, I cannot do that. I need to stay in either my own apartment rented somewhere or a hotel, which is also, it needs to have a space for work and everything. You can use co-working places, but that's not also not everywhere, right? So requires a little bit of research on that side. So usually the research that I do before going to places is like, is this compliant with all the security measures that like my clients have, and also is it safe, is it a good place to work, the place that I stay, how the connection and logistics are going to look like in terms of being available for the clients and stuff like this. So yeah, a lot of planning on that side. The exploration is just the fun on top of this.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you seem like a very independently minded person. So you don't get, like I say, you perhaps you don't miss home quite so much as other people might. Or how did you feel moving away from your sort of normal environment? Did you feel like you had to? There were moments where, oh, did I make the right choice? You know, it's not 5 minutes down the road anymore.
Oh, that's true. That's true. Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, that it is true that I've always been a very like independent person. I moved out pretty quickly out of my parents. And I've been on my own. I absolutely love coming back to my parents and my sister. Meeting with my friends and everyone. I always miss them. Like one of the most difficult thing with traveling is that you cannot take those people with you. Especially when you have like me, you have a lot of friends like here in Poland and then now in Japan as well. There is no equilibrium. Like I'm always going to be missing people somewhere, right? So I need to
Yeah,
have balance a little bit here, a little bit there. It's also sometimes pretty challenging, especially in the moments where things go wrong. That you miss people, and I was reminded about that two times in a couple years when I actually got like very very sick during travels, right? I was first time I was traveling from Portugal to Nice in France, in south of France, and I got super sick. I was so sick that I was like basically fever dreaming. I was walking around the city. I didn't even know what's going on. I had like 40 degrees fever or something like this. Of course, I went to the doctor, but then I end up in the hotel just being completely alone. And there was like no one. Like I just need to take. You need to find this kind of fortitude and just push through it. But even though my family and friends were not with me there at the moment, the fact that they are there and they are like asking about, do you need something, we're talking regularly, that really boosts your morale, that really helps. And also I know that I have that kind of people in my life that if I'll be half across the world and I would tell them that, listen, I need rescue, they will not wait a moment, they will just fly and they will rescue me, even though they know nothing about this place. They hate flying, right? And everything, they will still come to the rescue. Like I know that they will do that, and I'm blessed to have people like that. And that's one of the most one of the biggest lessons that I have in that regard in the recent couple of years. And a very similar thing happened to me when I was in Japan this year. At the very beginning of the year, I also get really really sick. Um, but I have people there that I already know, and they come to help me, right, and to support me, and you need food, you need anything, we're here. Just let us know, we can help you, right? But of course, yeah, it is tough sometimes in a situation like that for me. Other than this, I don't really have a problem with like missing people. I know that I'm just gonna go to them. I like adventures, and so I don't, if I go to new places, like have some sort of adventure somewhere, I don't really miss people that much in the sense that, oh my God, I wish I would be at home. Why did I came here? I don't really have that. There are some places which I just regret that I came here. I'll be completely honest. I'm not gonna name places, but there's been some places where I get in and it's just not a pleasant experience. And in a huge part, it's because of my decisions. Like I could organize that better. I could do better research, and I probably avoid a lot of this. But because I didn't, now I need to deal with this thing. Um, Still, that doesn't mean that those kind of experiences are not going to lead to anything positive. On the contrary, they're actually every single place where I visit, which I had a hard time for various reasons. There is always something amazing about this place as well that I've learned. I either something learned something about the place or about myself, and that's amazing. So there's always something positive about that. Even if you are sick, lying someone in a bed half across the world, I actually appreciate those moments because they help me understand how much I value people in my life. And I'm actually writing about that in the book that I'm working on. Is going to be published this year. One of the stories is about that exact experience.
Yeah. So, can you pick one thing then that you kind of you learnt about yourself that you felt there was would be a valuable lesson for other travelers?
Things that I learned about myself that could be useful to everyone. I think that the most useful thing for an aspiring travelers, I would say, is that don't be afraid. Like the world is not really that scary. The people are not that different. Like most people are just like you and me. 99% is the same. Like 99% between people is the same. There is only the positive things that you can learn. So if you're afraid, um, just don't be. Of course, maybe don't jump in the most dangerous place in the world. But if you're just it's good to have a travel experience by yourself, right? You don't go to a super dangerous place, but go somewhere that fascinates you, like the place where I went to Tokyo. It might be it might be the beginning of something amazing, of an amazing adventure, right? So if there is a place where you would want to go, and you feel like you would want to go there yourself, do it. If you're afraid, do more research, prepare better, right? Ask people. There is so many resources online. You can find something for yourself. If you don't want to travel yourself, travel with others. Not everyone. I love traveling by myself, but I know it's not for everyone. Some people prefer traveling with someone, with a group. I absolutely understand that. Yeah, but don't be afraid. Just try. Just try.
Yeah, yeah, good advice. So you mentioned that you're putting together a book, and
Oh yeah.
you spent 1 or 2 years, maybe 5 years, working on this book. So it must mean a great deal to you. Perhaps you could share what the book is about and
Yeah.
what you're hoping to achieve with it.
Yeah. So, as I said, I like storytelling, and what I do on social media, for example, is I tell a lot of stories about the places. They sometimes it's insight I learn about the place. Sometimes it's just something I learn about myself along the way, right? But I very quickly realized that I would want to put those stories and make a book out of this. Initially, I didn't have enough either photographic material because the book is Polaroid photos from 20 different locations and a story and a lesson that I learned from that particular place, right? So there's like 20 locations from 17 countries. It's I think like 200 photos, and then you have stories to this. Um, and and I knew that I wanted to do that, but I didn't really have enough material, either stories or photos. But then I started traveling more and more, and really started collecting a lot of photos and a lot of stories. And 2 years ago, I sit down and was like, okay, maybe I could actually, because I have a lot of stories which I really like so there are some stories which are like good and like, but there are some particular stories that I really want to share, and they're like very like I have emotional connection to them, right? So I wanted to put them in a book, and I very quickly realized that there is more stories that can fit in any book. So I was like, okay, this is a good moment to start working on it and start trying to put together a book. because I already have enough material probably for like 2 or 3 more books. So let's start working on this. I started putting it together, as I said, selecting 20 stories. It was very difficult to find the right people to work with on this book. So graphic designers, publishers, and other people that will advise me on that. It took some time because a lot of the publishers they're like very money oriented on this, and for me this book is more personal. I really want it to be the exact thing I want it to be, right? It needs to be mine. Like I need to be proud of it, right? So fortunately I found absolutely amazing people to work with, namely Studio Boko, from Warsaw, that specialize in that kind of project. They are very passionate about their work, and I really need to have like a partner to work on this, right? So yeah, we started putting it together, and I have to say that the more we work on it, the more appreciation I find for this project, even for the things that I did, but especially for the work that the other people are also putting into that book. Yeah, so right now we are finalizing the design for the book, and then basically we're going to be doing some test prints, and after that I hope we're going to be able to publish this book before the end of this year.
Ah, very exciting indeed. Can't wait to see it.
Yep.
So, finally, I wanted to ask you about how you think travel is going to change in the future, and if there was one thing you would change about how people travel, or had the option to change, what would it be?
How it's going to change? I think that one of the changes that we've seen for quite some time, and we're going to see more of it and more of it, is that instead of going on a tours, people would want they prefer have like a more personal experience, which does not necessarily mean that they will plan everything themselves, because not everyone is that knowledgeable. They actually seek to the people, to other travelers, digital nomads, and they're like, oh, I would want to, like, I like the perspective of that person, and they would want to reach out to those people to have an experience which is similar to what that person seen. And we already see more and more of this. Like it's more like decentralized. It's less like the big travel agencies. It's more like people are following specific people that their way of exploring the world is closer to them, right? And also a thing that I've learned personally is that you might think that the way you travel the world is completely like no one likes that. I can assure you that there is at least 10 million other people in the world that are like this as well, and they would love to hear your story, and they would want to learn and learn, how to travel like this and how to have that kind of experience with you, because the world is, 7.5, almost 8 billion people, right? On social media you have almost everyone. So if you think about it, if one of 1,000 people, or even 10,000 people are like you, then you have 1 million people like you, right? So it's really, easy to find people, like-minded people that would have to have a similar experience. So that's the first thing. I think that that's definitely, people would want to have more, like individually designed experience, like with. So this opens a lot of opportunities for people like me and other travelers that have very unique experience and they're like very close to the place, because they can provide more fun and interesting insights to curious people like that.
And is there anything you would like to happen in the travel space?
What I would want, I think that maybe in the future I would even contribute that myself, is because I'm a digital nomad. I think that I understand what digital nomad means, and I feel like there isn't really a lot of places that really fits what I would need in the world. So I would like to see more places in various destinations around the world that fits my needs more in terms of accommodation and in terms of like work environment and everything like that. maybe in the future I would actually try to um, give some more insight and improve that space myself, right? And then try to build more places for digital nomads like this, because I think that a lot of people that build like the experience for digital nomads, they are not really digital nomads themselves, or they have very limited experience and they don't really understand what people need, right? So which it sometimes works, sometimes it doesn't, but I feel like once again like more personal touch to it, and more experience living like this can result in something um, um, more like better experience. Like it's going to make work and both travel and work for those people easier. Yeah, this is something that in the future, like far in the future, maybe I'll start doing something about that. But I've already seen some initiatives like that, which I think are closer to my heart, and I would hope for more things like this in the future. Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah, yeah. I think you're right. Well, Oscar, it's been absolutely amazing. I could talk to you all day about travel.
Certainly, certainly. Yeah, we can.
So, yeah, well, maybe we should do it again sometime. All
Yeah,
right.
certainly, certainly.
Well, thank you very much, and
Yep. Thank you as well.
good luck with the book publishing. And yeah, we will see you soon.
Yeah. Good luck with the podcast and bye everyone.